viewing this information, I will make a recording available. But to get started, again, my name is Jeff Hamlin. I am the Director of Learning and Development here at the Climate Corporation, and thanks for taking a little bit of time out of your day to join this webinar. This is an important topic, I think, because really one of the things that the FieldView platform does best, and where I think you, if you're a farmer, will see the most value out of the system is in helping you easily run experiments in the field to figure out what those practices are that are leading to higher profitability, higher yield, and what those practices are that may not be helping you, that you want to change or leave behind because they aren't giving you the benefit that you're hoping for. So today we're going to talk about that. We're going to go through some real examples of how farmers are using our system to design and run experiments in the field that they can learn from. But a couple of things before we get started. Number one, I have muted all the phone lines just to keep the background noise down. But as always, the most important thing I can do on these webinars is to answer your questions. So if you do have any questions about FieldView, and it can be on any topic, not necessarily related to what we're doing today, please chat those in using the chat or the question and answer functionality. It should be either on the right-hand side or the bottom of your screen. Just type those questions in, and I'll make sure that I get to them either as we go or once we're finished. The other thing is, I think that's about it. So let's go ahead and jump in. I'm going to do a couple of slides, and then we're going to spend a lot of time actually in the application itself. So to start with, I like this quote, and I'm sure many of you have heard it before, where the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. This has been attributed to Albert Einstein, but a little further research indicates that he probably wasn't the one that said it. But I think it applies, and it certainly applies to agriculture, where in the farming industry, if we don't try new things, we don't try new practices and new things in our fields, we're never going to get any better results. There are a lot of, different products out there coming on the market every year that, they may add yield or may add profitability to our operation. But we have to figure out what works and what doesn't, and figure that out as soon as we can, because we only have so many opportunities to put a crop in the ground. And if we can learn something this year, well, then we have all the years going forward to put that practice into play in our operation. Whereas if we don't learn it until 5 years down the road, well, that's 5 years of missed opportunity to take advantage of that learning. Actually, I'm getting one note here from someone saying they don't think they can't hear me on the application. So could someone, if you can hear me, could you, a couple people just chat in and let me know that you can, and I'm just going to make sure that audio is actually working here. Or, okay, it looks like at least one person, okay. Looks like most people can hear me, so I think it's just one person here that for some reason can't. I'll send her a recording afterwards. Okay, thanks everyone. Okay, moving on. What I was talking about here, so we have to try new things. And really your entire farm should be a test plot. So we should be able to run experiments in the field and understand how a particular product is impacting yield, or how a particular planter setting is impacting yield, or how a particular soil type is impacting yield. And these are all things that traditionally have been quite difficult to understand because the data that we collect on the farm is hard to aggregate and put in one place, and the software systems that have been available to us to analyze that data have been difficult to use and made things cumbersome to the point where we just don't get around to doing the kind of data analysis that we should. And the FieldView system really makes this, it's game-changing in this, and it's going to make this so much easier for you. And I'm going to show you some of these examples here today. And so to do that, I'm going to jump over and use my iPad and go into my Climate app and show you some of these examples. So let me share my iPad, and you should be able to see it on your screen in just a second here. Okay, so I think everyone should be able to see my iPad, and I am in what we call the Black app, the Climate FieldView Black app, where you can view all the data that's come in and do some analysis and things like that. And I'm going to show you a couple examples. These are examples that I work with farmers around the country on the FieldView platform. And these are examples that farmers that I work with have given me permission to share in these kind of training environments. As with everything that we do at Climate FieldView, the data belongs to the farmer, and it is the farmer's choice on who they share with and who can have access to this data. So I just want to emphasize in these cases, these are farmer data sets from farmers who have agreed to allow me to share this data for the purposes of these kind of training sessions. But the first one that I want to show you, this is a soybean field in Janesville, Wisconsin, which is just southeast of Madison. And if we go to it, this is actually a farmer who, it was his first year using the FieldView platform last year. A relatively younger guy and pretty tech savvy, and was able to jump in and do a lot of cool things in his first year out in terms of trying seed treatments and trying starter fertilizer and trying different populations and all kinds of different experiments in the field. But I want to show you one of them in particular that's the kind of experiment that, as I show you these things, I just want you to think about how you might want to do something similar on your farm, or what it is that you want to learn about on your farm, and how you could design an experiment to make sure that you do get that learning. So I'm going to go over here to 2018 soybeans. That's what he was looking at here. And what I want to do is I'm going to pull up the planting map, because in this case, what the farmer that I was working with here, he wanted to understand the effect of population on yield. So he was planting an as-grow soybean variety, and his seed salesman told him, hey, this is the kind of optimal population for planting in your area. But he wanted to find out for himself, you know, based on my farming practices, my soil types, the way that I farm, how does population impact yield, and what is that optimal population that I should be planting to maximize profitability? So he just did a very simple thing here, and he created a variable rate planting map here on this field. And he didn't do anything complicated where he created a script and he sent it to the planter and he loaded it up on the planter monitor and you know, nothing that complicated. He just went in, and as he was planting this field, he manually changed the populations as every 4 passes or so here, so that he had some blocks with higher population and some blocks with lower populations in that field. And then when it came to harvest, he got in the combine and he harvested, and he got a yield map that looked like this. And unfortunately, this is about as far as yield analysis and experimentation analysis goes in a lot of farmers that I talk to and I work with. They maybe have a planting map that shows them what they did from a population perspective, and then they have a harvest map that shows them what the yield was. And you can set these two maps side by side and try and look at them and say, hey, you know, what was the optimal population? And you can kind of qualitatively maybe make some understanding, get some understanding about what populations yielded higher than the others. But this is not the kind of quantitative data analysis that we need, where we can get some numbers that tell us specifically how yield was impacted by population. So we make this pretty easy. So if you're using the FieldView Drive or 2020 and you're collecting your data at planting, and so you have all your planting maps, and then you have all your harvest maps from collecting your data in the combine, once they're side by side like this, we've got some really easy to use tools here that are just going to allow us to draw a circle around this field and get a breakdown of how yield was impacted by various variables. So I'll show you how this works here. I'm just going to click the little circle button in the lower right-hand corner of the screen on one of these sides here. So I'm going to click that little circle button, and it says draw any shape on the map with your finger. And I'm going to just draw an analysis square around this part of the field. And what's going to happen here is, because all of my maps are stacked on top of one another, the system is going to take and analyze my yield in that part of the field where I drew the square and break it down by all of the variables that it knows about. So what we see here is it says, hey, you circled 43 acres on this field. The average yield in that square was 72 bushels an acre, and the average moisture was 14.1%. Now, what changed within this square? Well, the first thing it's going to look at is variety, and it's going to tell me, hey, it was all the same variety here. So that variety made 72 bushels an acre on those 43 acres. If we had had 2 varieties in this square, it would have told me how each variety did. So I would have gotten that breakdown by variety. But that's not what we were studying here. We were trying to study populations. So the next thing that I find out is by soil type. So it's going to give me a breakdown of how my yield varied by soil type according to the government Surgo soil database. And you'll get this breakdown if you are in the U.S., because in the U.S., we have government soil type information for every field within the lower 48. Now, if you're in Canada or another country, we don't have this same government database in those other countries, so you won't get the soil type breakdown. But as you can see here, we have a few different soil types in this field, and we can see that how our St. Charles silt loams yielded versus our Juneau silt loams versus our Fox silt loams, and how that impacted yield. But what we're really looking to get to here is the yield by population, and that's the next section. I'm going to scroll through here and we'll read through the results. So basically what we find out here is by population, this farmer planted some high populations down to some low populations, and we see that when he planted 165,000 seeds an acre, he got 72 bushel yield. When he planted 155,000 seeds an acre, he got 72 bushel yield. 145,000, 71, 135,000, 71, 125,000, 73, 115,000, he got 72 bushels, 105,000, he got 72, 95,000, he got 70, and 85,000 seeds an acre, he got 73 bushels an acre yield. So what did this farmer learn in this population experiment that he ran? Well, what he learned is that he does not see almost any response to population in this hybrid based on the farming practices that he uses. So it doesn't matter whether he plants soybeans at 165,000 seeds an acre or down to 85,000 seeds an acre, he is always getting approximately 72 bushels an acre of yield. So what did he learn? And certainly it's not that he didn't learn anything. He learned that he can save money on seed. At least in this field and the characteristics that exist in this field, he does not see a benefit to planting higher populations. So I talked to him a couple of weeks ago when we were going through this and reviewing what he had learned here. And so I said, well, what are you going to do here? And so he said, well, it's going to be a cornfield this next year, but what he's going to look at is the fertility in this field. There's something that's limiting him from making more than 72 bushels an acre, and it's certainly not population. But maybe it's pH, maybe it's P, maybe it's K, maybe it's organic matter. There's something in here that is the limiting factor that's keeping him from breaking that 72 bushel an acre yield mark. And so if he grid soil samples this field and understands some of the details of what's going on in the soil in this field a bit better, maybe he can make some improvements to it that are going to allow him to start to see some increased yields as he pushes populations a bit. But for the moment, there's not any use in him pushing populations in this field because something else is the limiting factor, and that's his next step to try and figure out what that is. So this is one simple example of how you can run an experiment to learn something about your field, optimize your profitability. We are making sure that you're putting the right inputs in the field and not either overseeding, not putting down products that aren't giving you any benefit, but quickly see those results just by doing the things you're already going to do. Plant the field, spray the field, do fertility, harvest the field. And with the FieldView platform, the data will be waiting for you there at harvest to draw some circles and learn about how a particular practice impacted yield. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on and try and show you guys another example. So this one, I go back, I'm going to pick another field here that is, which one is it here? Here it is. This is a wheat field in Kansas. And if I look at this one, I'm going to split the screen again, look at two variables at the same time. Let's find our 2017 winter wheat crop. And if we look at the harvest, the yield map for this field in 2017, we can see that we had good yields in this field, but we had really good yields in one part of the field. And that part of the field, if we look at it, it looks like it's kind of bounded by some straight lines, more or less. And Mother Nature doesn't work in a lot of straight lines. So this is probably something that we did in this field that led to these higher yields in this part of the field. So if we can figure out what it is, well, then that may be something we want to do more of in going forward. So because, this farmer has used the FieldView platform in their planter, in their sprayer, in their combine, all the different passes across the field, the data is all waiting for us to look at and figure out what was it that drove yield in that part of the field. Then if I go through it, I can start looking at my planting maps, for example, and say, hey, well, what varieties did we put in this field, and was it a variety change? And we can quickly see here that we did have two varieties. We had Grainfield and we had Westbred 4721, but neither of those tells the story of yield in that part of the field. Well, what about population? Did we change populations, and was that the driving factor? And we can see, again, we had some variability in population, but nothing that correlates with that yield change there. Well, what about planting date? Did we have a replant in some part of the field? And no, we had the headlands planted on one date and the rest of the field planted on another, but nothing that tells that yield story. In this case, what it was is the farmer's chem rep had come to him and said, I've got this foliar cytokinin. It's this growth regulator that we've been seeing some success with in the area, and I think it's something that might help you. I think it might work well in your field. And as a farmer, there's certainly no shortage of people coming to us and saying, hey, I've got this particular product, it's going to add 5 bushels to your yield, and I've got this product, it'll add 3 bushels to your yield. And if we bought all those products that everyone tells us are going to add, 2, 3, 5, 10 bushels to our yield, we'd probably go broke farming because you can't buy them all, because a lot of them probably aren't going to work for us, but some of them will. And so occasionally we got to try these things and see what it is, see if we can find an advantage in using some of these products based on the way that we farm. And so that's what this guy did. He said, okay, I'm going to try this product that my chem rep is telling me he thinks would work for me. I'm not going to spray it across my entire 10,000-acre farm. I'm just going to try it in one location and see if it can provide me with a benefit. And so if we look here, we'll look at his in-season map and look at his applications, and we can see where he sprayed this product. There's the as-applied map from the sprayer, and where he sprayed it obviously has a pretty high correlation with where the yields were better in this field. Okay, so now we know that the product, it did increase yield, but this product isn't free. I don't know what it cost him, if it was $20 an acre or $15 an acre, but whatever the product costs, we have to make sure that the yield bump that we get is enough to offset the cost, and it's actually net profitable for us to use it. And so again, our system makes this kind of yield analysis easy because we can just take and use our finger to draw circles on these maps and tell us about yield in different parts of the field. So if I click this little circle button, I can come in here and say, hey, tell me about yield where I sprayed, and just kind of approximate the area where I sprayed. And the system will quickly tell me that, hey, your yield in that part of the field was 118 bushels an acre. So I made 118 bushel wheat here where I sprayed it. Okay, well, what did I make where I didn't spray it? If I take some other part of the field and draw a circle, now I see that I made 85 bushel an acre wheat here. So now my farm, my data, not the chem rep telling me about how great it could be, but this is really my farming practices. I have numbers that tell me this is if I do the math in my head, I think it's a 33 bushel yield advantage to using this product. And now I can make an informed decision to say, okay, yeah, it proved itself that it worked on my farm, and I can do more of this going forward. And I think the really cool thing about this is let's talk about how this experiment might have gone if this farmer didn't have access to the FieldView platform. And I'm not saying that this is how it always goes, but I'm sure some of you will identify with this story and that sometimes this is the way that experiments go in the field. So let's say we didn't have FieldView. What would have happened? Well, the chem rep would have given us some of this product to try out in the field. We would have gotten in the sprayer. We would have put these spray passes down. Then we would have gotten out of the sprayer and gone ahead and put some flags on the edge of the field here to mark off where that trial was. Now, with that trial in place, sometimes things happen and those flags get run over. Maybe it's dad, maybe it's someone else, but we had the flags at the edge of the field and someone runs them over, and now all of a sudden we may not remember or have good detail on where exactly that trial went into the field. Now, so then come harvest, we get in the combine, we say, okay, well, this is the field that had the trial in it, so we should go ahead and get the weigh wagons out, and we should harvest a strip and weigh it and harvest a strip and weigh it and get a real understanding of, did this product add to yield and how much yield benefit did it give me? But then you might have two problems facing you. Number one, those flags that you had that marked off exactly where the trial is may be missing at this point in the season, and so you may not know exactly where to harvest those strips to do the test of with and without the product applied. And then secondly, This may, again, happen to some of you sometimes. You might get busy at harvest, and you might not have the time to get the weigh wagon out and slow down harvest and harvest those strips and weigh them, and you might just have to go. And so what may happen at harvest is you go ahead and you just put the hammer down on the combine and you get through this field, and the way that you might evaluate this trial is going to be by watching the numbers roll by on the combine monitor and saying, well, I think this is the part of the field where I had the trial, and it feels like the numbers are higher here. And so, yeah, I kind of think this worked for me this year. And that's clearly not the way that we should be evaluating trials that we put into our fields. We want real numbers that tell us truthfully how much yield advantage we got and did the product pay for itself. And if we're watching numbers on the combine monitor as we bounce through the field and things are buzzing at us and we're trying to unload and all kinds of other things are going on, it's really hard to tell. Now, in this case where we had a 30 bushel yield advantage, yeah, that might work. The old way of doing things where we kind of just get that gut feel and understand, hey, was my yield here higher and did it work? That might work out for you. But if this yield advantage that we had gotten from this product was 3 bushels or 5 bushels or 6 bushels or something smaller, it gets really hard to tell true data from the noise as we are kind of watching those numbers on the monitor, and we need a system that allows us to do it more quantitatively. And again, the FieldView system is really good at this. Never again will you need to put a flag out in the field to mark off where you put a trial. Never again will you need to get a weigh wagon in the field and harvest strips and weigh them to determine these things and slow your harvest down. You will be able to just do what you always do. Plant, spray, fertility, tillage, harvest, all those different passes of the field, and the geospatial maps will be waiting for you on your phone, on your iPad, for you to draw circles on and figure out what the yield impact was of every pass that you made through the field that season. Okay, questions about any of this, certainly feel free to type those in. Let me show you one more example, and I'm going to show you this one in the CAB app because it's got a little bit of different features that you might not have seen yet, and I want to make sure you're aware of. So I'm going to go over and launch the CAB app. You can do all this data analysis in the Black app or the CAB app. The results will end up being the same. They share a database, but the Black app is kind of nice because you can use it on your phone a little more easily, and there's just a little bit more accessibility there. But if I go into the CAB app, I'm going to look at a particular field here called Jefferson Center. And in this particular field, what the farmer did was I pulled up the planter speed map on the left-hand side of the page, and I pulled up my yield map on the right-hand side of the page. And what the farmer was testing here is, can I plant at a higher speed without losing yield? Because if I can go through the field at a higher speed without losing yield, well, that's money in my pocket essentially. I can cover more fields a day. I can get my fields planted at the right time of year in the optimal conditions, because I can get through those fields faster. So I can get it. There's a lot of benefits if we can learn definitively that planting at a higher speed doesn't cost us yield, or at least that the yield drag that we get is small enough that it's offset by the benefits of getting across more acres in a day. So as you can see here on the planter speed map on the left-hand side, he, in the middle of this field, slowed down to less than 3 miles an hour for one of those passes, and then he slowly sped up, and a couple passes later did one where he was approaching 6 miles an hour and bumping up above 6 miles an hour with his planter. So what we want to see is, what was the yield impact? And again, by looking at the yield map, it's kind of hard to tell. There's a lot of noise in there. And again, this is the kind of thing where if we got in the combine and started harvesting, we'd never be able to tease out these differences. But with our system, we can go ahead and do these sub-field yield analyses where we look at certain parts of the field and can see numerically what the yield difference was. And one of the cool things that we can do in the CAB app is, instead of drawing a circle with our finger, we can actually select particular passes that we want to analyze. So we very precisely choose the area. Instead of drawing a rough circle with our finger, we can tap it with we can select the pass. Let me show you how that works. So using the button next to the house in the upper right-hand corner, I can go ahead and I can say I want to create a field region, just like I did in the Black app. And my options here, I can draw something freehand, I can create a polygon, or I've got this select passes option. And if I click on select passes, I can go ahead and say, I'm going to try and tap that pass very precisely here if I get it right. So I tap that pass, and it highlights that entire pass with the planter. And now if I hit done, it's going to use that as my region for analysis. And it says, okay, you selected 1.1 acres, a specific pass of the planter, and you made 142 bushels an acre in that pass. Okay, so now I know how much I made when I planted it less than 3 miles an hour. What did I make when I made, so 142 bushels here. I'm going to go ahead and save that field region just so that it's, and I can give it a name here. I could say this is my, my 3 mile or MPH pass and save it. Okay, now I want to compare it to my 6 mile an hour pass. So I'm going to go ahead and create another region here and select a pass and tap that one and hit done. And my 6 mile an hour pass here made 152 bushels an acre. So what I see in this particular example is that I made 142 bushels an acre when I planted at 3 miles an hour, and I made 152 bushels an acre, 10 bushels more when I planted at 6 miles an hour. So this is obviously a very limited data set. This is one trial, 2 passes in the field, but in this particular case, it's showing me not only do I not have a yield drag, I actually got higher yield when I planted at higher speed. So, you know, that may be just an artifact or, you know, of changes in soil type or some other reason why that happened. But I've got one data point here now saying that I don't have yield drag by planting faster. So what I might want to do is I might want to replicate this more times across the field or in some other fields and see if I continually get this result. But if I do, if I continually see that planting faster is not costing me yield, well, that's certainly a valuable learning that I was able to get out of using the FieldView system, because that's going to allow me to take greater advantage of the best planting windows during the course of the season by getting across more acres. So just wanted to show you how that one works as well, where you can select particular passes. And I could have done this on the foliar cytokinin spray in the wheat as well, where instead of drawing a circle and kind of roughly defining where I sprayed it, I could select those passes and exactly define where I had sprayed that product so I can see my yield in that precise region where the sprayer had actually passed. So just some tools to make sure that you're aware of as you're building these regions where you did test. The other thing I'll mention here is, you know, let's say that you're looking at, and I'm going to go back to the black app just to show this because it's a little easier, I think. But as you're in the field, let's say you're planting a field and you're, let me just grab something else here. Let me go back to this one. But as you're in the field and you're planting or you're doing something, maybe you want to test something that you can't map. Maybe you want to test a planter closing wheel setting, or you want to test a downforce setting on the planter or something like that you're maybe not going to get a map of if you don't have a planter setup that creates maps of those variables. You can still test and evaluate how that impacts yield by using the dropping pin functionality in the cab app or the black app. So as I go through the field, I can say, you know what, I changed a planter wheel setting here, and I can, you know, so I give it a title, changed, setting, whatever it is that I changed and done, and then I go ahead and I drop another pin where I change it back, and I can basically mark those virtually where, again, I don't have to go out and put a physical flag in the field that I may run over or lose later in the season, but I mark those virtually with these pins, and then at the end of the season when I harvest, I have a space there that where I can draw my circle and say what was my yield where I made this change to the setting, because it's marked, I won't lose it, and I'll be able to know where I want to draw that circle later. Or the other thing, I can mark it with these pins, and when I'm done planting, I could use that tool that I showed you earlier where I select the passes. I could go in there and select those passes that fall between those two pins, create that as a region, save it, and then come harvest, that'll already be waiting for me there as a region to do yield analysis on, because I've already marked where that region is and which passes had that change to the setting that I was trying to evaluate. So even things that maybe you can't map, you can go ahead and do by dropping pins and creating regions virtually on top of your maps to do yield analysis later. One other thing that I'm going to show you, because one of the other things that's important here is if we're going to do yield analysis, we need good data to do it on. And sometimes our harvest maps are not as good as we would like them to be because the combines are not calibrated well. And so let me show you this in case you haven't seen this before. But if you have harvest data in the system, we make post-harvest calibration or post-harvest adjustments of yield data really easy to do. And I'll show you what it works like. So if I go in here to my map and I choose this, where is this? I've got an example in here. I think it's this Hunter Northeast. So I've got a harvest map here for soybeans that looks like this. And there's a couple things going on here. But first thing I want to talk, so first of all, I've harvested this field and I've got a certain yield. And if I look at this little arrow button next to the house, I can look at the harvest summary for this field. And it gives me some information here at the top that says, hey, you harvested 587 acres. The total wet weight was 1.862 million pounds. The average moisture was 11.2%. It was 31,000 dry bushels and a 52.8 bushel per acre average yield. Okay, so that's what we read off of the combines as they moved to the field. But what I probably have for this field is I probably have scale tickets that tell me exactly how much yield came out of this field. And if my combines aren't calibrated properly, these numbers aren't going to match. But what you can do post-harvest is if you've got your scale tickets for this field, you can come back in here and true up this data very easily. Where it says tap to adjust field yield, I can come in here and just say, okay, you know, it wasn't 1.862 million pounds that came out of this field. It was 1.7 million pounds. And so I come in and I just update that value saying 1.700000, and you'll see my average yield for this field is going to change when I update this. Instead of being 52.8 bushels per acre, when I hit done, it adjusts my whole map, and it says, okay, well, you actually got 48.2 bushels per acre. You know, not as high as what the machines were reading, but this is the true yield that I made in my field because it matches my scale ticket. So one of the things that you can do to make sure that all these yield analyses, these experiments that you're running in the field and how something worked or didn't work, that you're using true data, is true up your information in the FieldView platform with your scale tickets for each field so we've got the right numbers to begin with. Then the other thing that we see in this field, so I made that change, and if you ever want to go back, we always save, as you can see here, it says in the original, you can always see what the original machine numbers were. We're never going to get rid of that number for you. It's always going to be there for you to go back to if you need it to. But in this case, we overrode it with our scale ticket numbers. But if I close this, you can see my map updated now. But now what do I see, or what could I even see before, is I've got this weird striping in this field. And why do I have this striping? I mean, is it true that my yield was good in one pass and bad in the next pass and good in the next pass and bad in the next pass? I had this, you know, back and forth yield of good and bad yield throughout the course of this field. No, that's not what happened. What happened in this field is we had multiple combines in the field and they were just calibrated differently. So I had one of my combines calibrated higher than the others, and it causing this artificial signal in the field showing me that I had good and bad alternating yields, and that's just not really the case. So if I was to go in here and try and analyze some sort of pass-by-pass yield or a region yield, it might not give me the right results because of this combine miscalibration issue. So again, we make this pretty easy too, where we can go in here to the yield analysis results, say, I'm going to look at my harvest summary. I already adjusted my full field data, but down here below, I have the ability to adjust my combine yield on a combine-by-combine basis. And if I tap this one, it says, hey, you had 3 combines in this field, 2 S680s and 1 9870, and the 9870 averaged 55 bushels an acre, while the S680s averaged 45 bushels an acre. So one of them was averaging 10 bushels more. This is just a combine calibration issue, and so I can hit the pluses and the minuses here to redistribute the yield across those combines, or we have an easy button over here called Auto Adjust on the left-hand side, where I can just click Auto Adjust, and our algorithm will smooth that data out across those combines so that it says, okay, we're going to assume that they all harvested approximately the same average yield. We'll smooth it out, get rid of the striping largely, and give you a better starting point from which to start running yield analysis and take away that artifact of the poorly calibrated combine. So there are some tools in here to do this. You probably don't need to worry about this until we get to harvest of 19, at which point I'll be going through and doing webinars on how this works again. But if you want to play with these tools on your 2018 harvest data or your 17 harvest data, please feel free to do so, using your scale tickets to adjust the full field yield and trying to fix up some of these situations if you ever have multiple combines in the same field and you have this striping, so that you have some true, so basically all your data matches and your yield numbers are in fact correct before you get too far into data analysis. Okay, so that is about it there. I think I have a couple more slides I'll show you just to give a couple more examples of the kind of things that farmers are doing with this. And again, anyone who has questions, please feel free to type those in. But, you know, this is another example here on the screen where I was actually, this is that same Kansas farmer that we did one of the lead examples previously. I had been out visiting with him, and then I had gone back home to California, and he was putting in this population trial, and I was using remote view to watch him plant as I was here in California. But what he was doing here, as you can see, is he was putting in a different population of this Westbred 4269 variety with each pass of the planter. And what, you know, this is the kind of experiment you would never run in the field if you didn't have access to a system like FieldView, because analyzing it at the end of the year would be extraordinarily difficult without a good kind of software system. But for him, he knew that he could put these different population passes in, and then come harvest, just draw a big circle around this field, and it would automatically tell him what his yield was by population in this field, so he could build that population response curve and understand, based on his farming practices, what the best population is, or the optimal population for maximizing profitability. I think I have one other example here. Yeah, this one, this is with one of our agronomists who farms in Indiana, and what he says here in this tweet that he put out was he was tracking his disc gripper passes with FieldView. I think I'll skip a few passes and see if it affects next fall's yield map. So he was basically building a tillage map in FieldView where he skipped a couple of passes of his deep ripping, and then he planted the field and then harvested the field. And by just drawing a circle across that part of the field on the harvest map, he's able to get his result that tells him what is my yield with deep ripping versus what is my yield without deep ripping. And again, we get back to that question of every pass through the field that we're making through the field should matter, and it should be having a positive impact on our yield. And if it's not, well, maybe that's a practice we need to leave out. You wanted to figure out what is the impact of deep ripping, and is it worth it for me to be doing this? And again, our system makes it really easy. So what I would encourage you to do, and I'll go to this last slide, is think about what you want to learn in 2019. What practices are you implementing in your fields that you want to quantify the benefit that they give you? And don't do anything at a flat rate across the field. I mean, some things you'll want to do at a flat rate across the field. But if you have the opportunity, do a half rate, do a full rate, leave a check strip, you know, change your population, change a machine setting. Do something different so that when you get to harvest, you're going to be able to draw a circle in that field and understand how yield changed according to that variable. And learn things about what's driving yield in your field and which practices may not be giving you the benefit that you hoped, and maybe, you know, something that you need to leave behind. The last couple things on here is if you have questions about anything FieldView, we have a fantastic support team based in St. Louis. They are all people with farming backgrounds. They all speak English. They are in our St. Louis office, and you can always call them on that 888-924-7475 number with questions. And the last thing I'll mention is I have this very simple email address of jeff@climate.com, just because I've been at the company a long time, and when we started, we said, hey, we don't need last names. There will never be another Jeff at the company. And lo and behold, now we're a much larger company, and there are multiple Jeffs, but I'm the original one. So I have jeff@climate.com, and if there's anything I can do for you, I'm not nearly as accessible as the support team. I travel quite a bit, but drop me a note. I love to work with farmers and dealers, and I'd like to help point you in the right direction if there's something I can do. That said, I think I'm about done in terms of showing you some of those examples. So let me see if there's any questions that came in, and I will go through those. One I see here is a question from Jared about what type of planter was it. I think that was with respect to the the one that we were changing speed on. I don't know. This is that was one of our, as a farmer in Fort Wayne, Indiana area, I know it's a deer planter, but I actually don't know the model number on that one, Jared, that he was testing that 3 mile an hour to 6 mile an hour planting difference. One here from Steve: is there a manual or online showing how to do all the different things, such as setup, etc.? So as far as getting set up with the FieldView system to collect planting data, to collect spraying data, I do these webinars. I think I have one on Friday of this week of how to get ready for planting, how to get ready for spraying, and how to get ready for the 2019 season. And so I would probably start there. I'm actually going to send out a link to a list of recordings of these kind of webinars after this webinar is complete here, and I think there is a recording of that already in that YouTube channel, so you can either watch the one that I sent to you or join the live webinar this Friday, or I'm going to be doing a whole bunch of them in March as well on a variety of topics. Let's see if there's looks like a couple people didn't have audio this time, so again, I'll send those recording, and that should hopefully solve that. A question here from Daniel about, in the soybean population test, how do you get the different population rates to show solid colors for each different population? Yeah, that's a good question, Dan. I had to play around a bit with the rates, and let me just show you how this works. Let me see if I can share my screen. Share. Okay, I should be able to see my screen now. If I go back to that soybean population trial, planting population. So there's a scale here that you can edit on the right-hand side of the screen, picking a max and picking a minimum and choosing how many steps you want there to be. And when I looked at this map by default, I didn't have those solid colors in there. But by playing around with it enough and making sure that the breaks were at even numbers, like as you can see, I made the breaks so that they were at every 5,000 in terms of population. I was able to get this to show in solid colors. So it really is a matter of playing with that map or playing with that scale there to make sure that the breaks are at the right point to capture what you did from a planting perspective. It's not, unfortunately, it's not like a super easy magic process where you click a single button. You just got to make sure that you set the number of steps right and the range right so that you get the breaks in the right places to map to a particular color. Let me see what else. I think a few other questions came in here. Question here about, can you look at a yield map from one year and compare it to a treatment from a previous year? Yes, David. So I looked at, let me just share again. So let me share my iPad. Let me pick a field that's got multiple years of data. I think that Indiana one does. Where is it? Okay, so if I pick a field that's got multiple years of data and I split the screen using that little book button in the upper right-hand corner, I could say, hey, let me look at my 2018 corn yield. So here's the yield I made in 18. And on the other side of the page, I can pick anything. I could pick, basically it's a matter of just picking which year. I could say, well, in 13, what did I do from a spray perspective or a fertility perspective or a planting perspective, if I have the data layer in there. So it's just a matter of picking the right, I could say, I think I've got a planting. Here's a 2017 soybean planting map versus a 2018 corn yield map. You can pick any maps you want. It's just a matter of using that first drop down on each side of the page to choose the right year and crop, and then you can see, yeah, hey, in that year this is where I sprayed, or this is where I did manure application, and how did that flow through 2 years later in terms of yield. That's certainly possible just by making the right selections at the top of the page. Question about, can you evaluate individual planter passes with yield? Say a replicated strip trial of one planter with each. Yeah, Jack, it sounds like, okay, it looks like you answered your own question. Yes, you can. So just a matter of picking those planter passes. The key thing with those kind of experiments is thinking about how wide your planter is and how wide your combine is, and making sure that you're getting pure passes with the combine that are lining up, and you're not sort of you've got a 40-foot bean head and you've only got a 12-row planter and they're not the same width, and you're not getting pure passes. You have to think about, as you're putting it in, making sure that you do enough passes with the planter that when you get in with the combine, you're going to be able to get pure passes with that combine to make sure that your results aren't sort of contaminated because the head is overlapping with several different practices. Question here from Todd about what percentage of a field's acres should be put into a test area that would give solid results with good data? Yeah, Todd, that's a really good question, and it's something that we haven't given a lot of guidance to yet. We've provided the tools here to run experiments and get the results out, but whether those results are statistically significant is an area that we haven't given a lot of guidance to in our software system yet. So we kind of leave it up to the farmer to define how big of a test area do I want to do. And if you think about that example I did with the speed on the planter, that was just one pass at 3 miles an hour and one pass at 6 miles an hour that happened to give me a result that showed the 6 miles an hour out-yielded the 3 mile an hour by 10 bushels an acre. Now, is that statistically significant? Can I extrapolate from that and say that, hey, every time I plant at 6 miles an hour, I'm going to get better results than when I plant at 3 miles an hour? Absolutely not. That was just one pass in one field. You certainly need to do more than that, but how much you need to do, that we're not giving a whole lot of guidance on that as yet. It's kind of design the experiments, put in enough that you think is relevant or in the right parts of your field where you think that that represents your farming practices in general, but certainly more than the one pass that I had there would needed to make any definitive conclusions. One question here about from Michael about when is FieldView going to support soil results in pounds per acre? I think what you're asking here is like my P and my K and my nitrogen results in terms of how many pounds per acre instead of parts per million. I don't know for sure where that lies, Michael. I think I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question yet, but if you call support, they may know a little bit more about that particular feature, or they can certainly make sure that it gets logged as a request. Question from Cody about, is there a way that you can move yield data if it was recorded for the wrong field? Yes, that is something you can do. And let me see if there's only one other question here. The other one's, is there a way to clean up data if your yield monitor always shows a higher yield when the unload auger is running versus when it's off? I'm assuming this is RPM related. It causes the same kind of striping that you showed on the multiple combine map. Yeah, Jeremy, that one, the only thing that we allow at the moment is adjusting the combine by combine yield. If you have a single combine in the field that's getting striping because of the unloading auger running and causing some different, that enfortunately we won't be able to clean up at the moment. We don't have a tool that allows you to calibrate an individual combine under different conditions, unfortunately. But to Cody's question about, is there a way you can move yield data if it was recorded for the wrong field? Yes, there is, and it's kind of cool. And let me just go ahead and I'll show you this if I can get to the right place. Give me just a minute because it has to be done on web. Climate.com. I'm going to log in here and show you this because this is another good part of cleaning up your data when it happens to, because it certainly happens that occasionally you'll end up with an operator that says, hey, I forgot to switch the field, and now I've got all my data for a couple of different fields all under one field. So let me do this. Let me share my screen. Share. Okay. You should be able to see my web page now, and the place that you can go to clean up yield or planting data that is associated with the wrong field, it has to be done on Climate on the web. So you have to go to climate.com and log in, and this is what you'll see. And we always recommend when you're using Climate on the web to use Google Chrome as the browser. Internet Explorer, Safari, Firefox, those browsers have some problems with some mapping things that we're doing. They don't always render as well, so we always download Google Chrome and use that anytime you're using Climate on the web. You'll have a better experience. But when you're in Google Chrome on the web and you're logged in at climate.com and you see the screen, you can go to Settings in the upper right-hand corner, and there's an option called Fix Data. And if I choose that Fix Data one, it's going to take me over to this section that allows me to fix data. Oh, but first let me show you what I'm trying to fix. I think this will actually give some clarity to it. Let me go back and show, I have an example of what I think you're talking about here, Jeremy, where if I go to LaRue. So this is a field where if I pull up the harvest data for 2018, oh, it was 18 wheat. So this particular field, if I look at the harvest data, you'll see that, this is the LaRue field, and here's the harvest data. What I also happened, and it doesn't look like it's going to populate entirely, but basically this farmer, he was in the combine, he harvested the LaRue field, then he drove down the road and he harvested this other pivot here to the southwest of it. And it's not pulling in all the data, but that field actually has a whole bunch of harvest data in it that's associated with LaRue that shouldn't be there because the farmer forgot to change the active field when he went from one field to another. So that's the situation that we're trying to fix here. And how do we do that? We go to the web, we go to Settings, we go to Fix Data, and inside of Fix Data, we will just choose the right year. So I say I want to fix my 2018 data. I want to fix either planting or harvest files at the top of the screen here. So I want to fix harvest files in this case. And then I find that LaRue field, the wheat part of it. So here's my LaRue field wheat. I check the box, and I would hit this Reprocess Spatially button. And what that'll do is it'll say, let's take all the data that is currently associated, all the harvest data that's currently associated with LaRue, and let's take it out of Climate. And then let's look at the GPS coordinates associated with each bit of harvest data, each yield data point, and where do those GPS coordinates live? And for the LaRue stuff, it'll say, hey, well, these coordinates live within the LaRue field boundary, so let's put them right back where they came from. But for that other data that's from the field down the road, it'll say, wait, these GPS coordinates don't belong in the LaRue boundary. They belong in the west field boundary, or whatever that field boundary is called. Let's put them in the place where they belong. And so this Reprocess Spatially button is a really cool feature that will just allow you to take any fields that have multiple, that we forgot to change the active field, take that data out, and put it back in the right place. And the only thing I would recommend if you're going to use this is make sure that your field boundaries are right before you use the Reprocess Spatially so that any data you take out, it has a place to go back in and we know where to put it. That'll just make the system go a little bit smoother. And when you do the Reprocess Spatially, it's going to take it out and it's going to put it back in, but you're not going to see it immediately. It's going to go into the data inbox where you get to approve it. So it'll basically go over here to the data inbox, and it'll look like, I think I've got some data in here already. It'll basically look like this, where in the Harvest tab, there will be data waiting to come in. And it'll say, here's the data that we just took out. When we put it back in, this is where we think it should go. And you just have to review it and make sure it's where you want it to go. Check the box and say, yep, that all makes sense. Now it's in the right place, and hit the import button. And then you will start seeing it again in your mobile apps and everywhere where you need it to go. So feel free to use that tool to go ahead and repopulate or move some of your data that may have gone to the wrong field. Good question, not necessarily what we were talking about today, but as mentioned, I want to answer all the questions that you might have about the system, so happy to do that. Where did my, okay, somehow I lost my, there we go. Stop sharing. Okay, see if anything else came in. I think that is it. Anything else come in? Looks like that's it, I think, from a question perspective. So hopefully that helped and everyone learned a little bit of something today. Certainly look forward to the experiments that you guys run in the field. If you do have any cool experiments that you want me to share and the kind of things you do in the field, I'd love to see those as well. So just feel free to drop me a note. But thanks again. Hope everyone has a winter end sooner than later, and we look forward to working with you in the 2019 season. Have a good afternoon, everyone. Thanks. Actually, it looks like I missed a question. Peter, I think you're still on the line, Peter, according to what I see here. So let me answer that, and I see that it came across here. Your question is, for the sprayer and tillage passes, did the farmer have the iPad linked to a monitor, or was it just using some type of location finder within the iPad? So yeah, when you're in the sprayer or wherever you are, you're going to have an iPad in the cab, and that iPad is going to be reading the machine data coming through the CAN port. That's how we get the data into FieldView. And so the main thing that you need is you just need to have a GPS on the piece of equipment that's going through the field, and that GPS needs to run through the CAN port. If that GPS is running through the CAN port, that's how we map. And in the case of a tillage bar, there's no other data coming through other than location data and how wide the tillage implement is. So basically, we're just mapping location as we go through the field and using the width that the farmer told us their tillage implement was. In the case of a sprayer, we have location, we have sprayer width, and then if the sprayer has a rate controller on it, we'll also be able to map rate as he goes to the field. So that if he changes rate or changes products, we'll be able to see those changes on the map as well. But essentially, yes, you have an iPad in there, but it's getting those location services not from the iPad, it's getting it from the GPS of the machine. So you need GPS on the tractor in order for that to work out. So I think you're still here, Peter. So if that answers your question, just send a quick chat. Okay, got it. Okay, thanks everyone. And again, we'll talk to you all soon.